Honestly, when I read the description for the new Thai Netflix movie Deep, all I could think of is how much it reminded me of Flatliners. Now, the original, not that terrible remake. So is this story a copycat, or does it bring something new? Four insomniac med students are lured into a neuroscience experiment that spirals out of control and must find a way out before it's too late. So we follow four main characters of this sci-fi thriller from Thailand. There's Jane, Win, Sin, and Peach. They're in med school and are approached to take part in an insomnia study, where if they can stay awake for a certain period of time, the cash payout is large. There are 3 levels to the program, and the farther they progress, the larger the payday becomes. To complicate their lives and to make sure they stay awake during the study, if they doze off for more than 60 seconds, something bad can happen to them. Now, the premise of this is entertaining. We have 4 semi-strangers who begin to form a friendship as they undertake this study. We get to see the motivations of the characters to get into their heads to see why they'd take part and why they're willing to take the risks. And there are some great camera effects as our characters dive deeper into their insomnia. The longer they go without sleep, the more their vision, hearing, and mental states are affected. The camera stretches and blurs the periphery, just barely keeping the center in focus, just like our characters are struggling to maintain some sort of focus. This effect works well, and it looks great. And there's a tension that is felt, not only internally by each character, but then also between the characters as the stakes are raised. There's also urgency built into the story as the characters fight against their bodily desires and their need for sleep. Plus, when that need is combined with a dangerous deterrent for falling asleep, the anxiety builds as the movie goes along. I struggled at the beginning to get invested in the story, but as I got to know the characters more, I was intrigued by what they'd experience next, and I wanted to see how far they'd go in the experiment. Something though that I had to endure pretty much the entire time is the acting. Now, our main players, they're not too bad. There are times where they're over-dramatic, but because of their mental states and the circumstances, it can be overlooked and even taken to be just a feature of how their character would react due to lack of sleep. But there is one character in particular that is just plain awful. Cringeworthy, want to turn away awful. He's the scientist or doctor who's in charge of the insomnia study. The way he delivers his lines is completely unnatural and very stilted. There are awkward pauses in his speech that make it just feel like he's really searching for his lines. I'm not talking like William Shatner pauses. These are just plain off-putting. Each time this character came on screen, it broke me out of any tension, suspense, and even interest. I was so turned off by the performance that it became distracting. Now, from a story perspective, I think there are some portions that are obvious and predictable. The entire film isn't that way, but certain plot points really weren't a surprise, and I think they were meant to be based on the reveals. There was a portion, though, that did manage to surprise me, so I enjoyed it when the story tricked me. This film is an hour and 41 minutes, and I wasn't really ever bored with it. Some of that is because there are portions that felt like I was watching a music video, just had tons of quick cuts and different camera angles. Now, even though I wasn't bored, sometimes those sequences felt like they just went on a little too long, and would have been more enjoyable if they were trimmed. From a character development side, there is some detail and information that went into our main players, but their motivations weren't always clear. I think had we been given a little more introduction to them, it really would have helped us to bond with each of them. And knowing why they were taking part in the study could also engage us in their success. There are some mysteries within the characters' past, namely Jane and Win. And they have complicated and even horrific family stories, and while the story teased it just a bit, they could have been explored more to then be exploited effectively by the story. So while I'm glad that this took on a life of its own and didn't turn out to be a copy of Flatliners, there are those parts that just weren't as stellar as they could have been. Overall, this wasn't a bad watch, it was just kind of okay. The characters began to grow on me, even though I would have liked to know more about them and then their motivations. And despite there being some surprises, a lot of this was obvious and predictable. I don't think it's something to rush to binge, but it is okay for a casual watch if you're looking for something a little different. There's no sexual nudity, some profanity, and a lot of violence. I give Deep 3 out of 5 couches. What's a good thriller you've seen recently? Let me know what you've watched in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.